This is my grandpa, Tom Pike. He's a well-known singer, at least around the east side of Salt Lake City. In fact, a major part of his life has been spent serving others with his musical talent. He's done it as a soloist, or with his wife, my grandma, Ellen Jean Adams Pike, or as conductor, or an organist, or with one of his daughters, my mom, Liz, or my aunt, Emily, or with one of his 4 sons. But I'm getting ahead of myself. A few years ago, for an elementary school project, I asked him a few questions about his life.
Why did they choose
those names? That's a good question. The name Gerald is an English name, kind of, and was a name in my family. And I met a Gerald England was his name, and my grandmother had a last name of England, and so Gerald was one of her son's names. And so my parents wanted to include that side of the family and chose that name. For me, that's how I got Gerald. I don't know how I got Thomas.
I went to FamilySearch.org to find Gerald England. It took me a few minutes, but it turns out Gerald is my grandpa's dad's cousin. Gerald is my grandpa's first cousin, once removed. He was about 16 years old when Grandpa was born. It's like if one of my cousins had a baby boy and gave him the middle name of Isaac. Gerald and Alfred lived in an England town called Stroud in Gloucestershire.
You know, we lived at 1434 Westminster Avenue. That was our home all of our younger years. That's where we were all born when my folks lived on that address. And I think, it seemed to me, I remember my dad saying he spent $3,700 for that house. Hard to believe. There was nothing down there but just a rough basement. And finally they built one big large room at the back, and we lived in there, but there was no bathroom downstairs. And I remember we had to go to the bathroom in a juice can during the night, because we were just little people.
So the 4 boys?
Yeah, the 4 boys were all down in that big room. Then later they built a couple of bedrooms downstairs and a bathroom.
That's sweet.
Oh, you know, Izzy, when we started, this home was fueled by coal furnace, and the trap door that the coal was brought into the house was just beyond that fence. You went down the basement into the coal chute down to where the coal was stored next to the furnace. And we'd have to go get the coal, put it in the furnace to burn, to make heat.
Yeah.
Then you had to dig out the clinkers, huh?
Then we had to take out the clinkers.
Yeah.
Do you remember doing anything like that? I remember taking Mrs. Monson's clinkers out too. Her husband died, and he'd been Secretary of State, however, when I was little.
Secretary of State is a position that in Utah was replaced by the office of Lieutenant Governor in 1975. Ernest Ephraim Monson, Grandpa's neighbor, had been a dentist until his eyes started to fail. So he took up politics. He served as Utah's Secretary of State from 1937, a few months before Grandpa was born, until his death in 1947, when Grandpa was 10. He died of an unexpected heart attack. According to an account written by his daughter, he was very popular with the voters and had been planning to run for governor. The governor that he served under, Herbert Maw, had only narrowly won in 1944. He ended up losing in 1948 to the same guy he ran against in 44. So it's very possible that had Monson lived, he may have won.
She lived over here. She lived in this house. Mrs. Monson was a widow, and her kids were gone, and she was alone. But on Halloween we put a body looking, anyway, a dummy.
They stuffed it.
And we kind of put it in there, and then rang the doorbell and ran. And she came out, and she had a little problem.
She wet her pants.
She wet her pants right there on the, scared her to death. Poor dear.
Oh, brother.
But she liked us. And we did a lot of stuff for her later on.
Edith Monson died in 1955, the year Grandpa graduated from East High. Let's assume that's a coincidence. Grandpa took me around his neighborhood. This is the Edge Hill Ward building. It's where Grandpa and his family went to church. The sculpted mural on the front of the chapel is well known. It's listed in the Smithsonian Art Inventory's catalog. The building is 1 year older than Grandpa. Their young men were really good at basketball. They took second in the all-church tournament in 1948 and 1953. This is Grandpa's elementary school, Garfield Elementary. A year or so after I got this footage, Westminster College, a private university located a few blocks from here, bought the school. They have leased it to Elizabeth Academy, a private school, as a second K-12 campus, which they will creatively call Garfield Academy. His middle school was called the Irving School. It's now been converted and expanded into 1 and 2 bedroom luxury Victorian apartments. They're pet-friendly, too. My grandpa was involved in a lot of extracurricular activities throughout his school years.
The New Year's Eve we did the town, the day we tore the goalpost down. We will have these moments to remember.
This is Grandpa's high school, East Salt Lake High School. You may have heard of it. Grandpa also showed me his Grandpa and Grandma Davis's house on Garfield Avenue. He lived in this neighborhood where the state prison was located at what we now know as Sugar House Park.
This is the entrance to Sugar House Park now. This was the entrance to the prison. I don't know how many stories, 2 or 3 or 4 stories of cells. And as I say, we'd throw snowballs over to try to hit the guys if we never could hit them. So you can see that this was a major development eventually to have this park.
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't put homes all in here.
Yeah. Look at all those birds, Jacob.
I brought some of the kids down to see the birds.
Do you see all those birds? We should come here
You'll
with
have to come
Grandpa.
down here, honey.
We used to do this.
We could bring some goodies.
We used to feed the ducks.
Feed the ducks.
Izzy was in on that, and Emma did it a couple times, but not much. For the rest
We'll
of
have to
them.
do it again, Jake.
So we feed him Cheetos.
For college, Grandpa went to the University of Utah, but we'll come back to that. He served a mission to London, England, and was there when the London Temple was dedicated.
When I was in England, on my mission was the British mission, or the England mission, and Richard L. Evans was a family friend. He was a Quorum of the 12 apostle. He came up to me at the dedication of the London Temple, and I was there because all the missionaries had gone to the temple to be a part of it. We were in the first session of the temple dedication ceremonies, and he asked me if I would sing Bless This House in the next session, the next day. Because there were several sessions, there were 6 or 8 sessions that they held. I didn't have any people I needed to accommodate. So that was kind of neat to get selected to sing at the dedication of that temple. And then part of that was right after, outside the temple, I had sung and I was outside. President McKay came up to me and I got to meet President McKay, and that was neat. and he asked me about a particular man, Charlie Pike, who was not my grandfather, but my grandfather's brother, but he was like my grandfather because my grandfather was dead when I was really young. I was about 4 when he and his wife both died. And so Charlie lived longer and was a printer, printed my farewell when I went on mission. But he was a boy soprano soloist with the Tabernacle Choir with Evan Stevens, when Evan Stevens was the conductor years ago of the Tabernacle Choir. And President McKay said, are you related to Charlie Pike? And then he went on to tell me about him. How he remembered when he sang a solo with the Tabernacle Choir.
Charles Raymond Pike, or Uncle Charlie, as my grandpa knew him, was my grandpa's great uncle. He was well known around the Salt Lake Valley for a couple reasons. First, for his printing business, which specialized in wedding invitations, and second, as the founding conductor for the annual Holiday Messiah presentation, which he led for 20 years. Charlie's first wife, Beatrice, died in 1928. He remarried in 1931 to Mary Hintsley. Uncle Charlie may have been fresh on President McKay's mind at the temple dedication because he died just 6 months before the dedication of the temple in London. My grandpa came home from his mission and went back to the University of Utah. Although he didn't major in it, his extracurricular life was filled with music and service. He joined the U's chapter of Sigma Chi. Where he served as the consul or president of the fraternity in the 1961 to 62 school year. Phil Pugsley, the proconsul or vice president, happens to be my scoutmaster's dad. He said, "We had a great year, and I loved serving with Tom. He was a terrific leader." Around this time, Grandpa started singing for funerals.
I was contacted by Larkins, the Larkin brothers. I knew them both a little bit, and they said, "Would you be available to sing for funerals when we need somebody?" And that was in 1960. So it's been that long. So I've had a relationship with Larkin Mortuary ever since.
It's like
That was
55 years.
Yeah, and that was the main one. But when you do that, it branches out and goes everywhere. I've sung at all the mortuaries, particularly I've sung at Wasatch Lawn quite a bit, and then the West Valley one, the Winders, who were involved in that. They used to use me quite a bit. They still do once in a while. So that was the main. The main ones where it was kind of a business arrangement was Wasatch Lawn and Larkins being the big one. And I still, I did a Larkins one just the other day. Most of my adult life, I probably sing at 2 or 3 funerals a week, typically. But now it's more like 1 or 2 a month. But then the other ones, the ones you just get called by the families to sing, and that's become a big part of it too. That just happens because they know I sing at funerals. I had to sing zippity-doo-dah. Zippity-doo-dah, zippity-dah. And some, I've been asked to sing funny ones. One I never really liked to sing, but was asked to sing quite often, was My Way. It seemed like a kind of a cocky approach to if I did it my way. I never did like that. Like I had to sing it several times. But I've sung them all. Western songs, cowboy songs.
Grandpa and Grandma got together while they were both performing in the musical play Promised Valley as Jed and Celia, respectively. Promised Valley with music by a 25-year-old Crawford Gates, and a book by a well-known Broadway writer, Arnold Sungard, had been commissioned by Governor Ma, remember him, to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Mormon pioneers entering the Salt Lake Valley. It was produced every summer for 2 decades, starting in 1947. In 1960, both Grandpa and Grandma's LDS Steaks were performing the show. According to Aunt Kathy, Grandpa's younger sister, our steak production was already cast when Tom got home from his mission. Grandma's steak was having trouble finding a jet to her Celia. She suggested to the director, Dorothy Kennington, call Tom. Dorothy knew my folks, and maybe Tom. She called, and he said yes, and the rest is history. Here's a look at the song breakdown per scene. You can see that Jed and Celia spend some time together.
I think one of the earliest things I did was go hear Ellen Jean sing in Tannhäuser, which was an opera that they were putting on in some festival. And that kind of got us started. And then she was a funny one. I don't mean to say this in any cocky sort of way, but she had her eye on me, and I didn't realize it. You know, I was just dumb. But she was trying to do anything she could to be where I was going to be. So we're up at the university. I'm in the male chorus there for a class at noon. And she just would be there at the end of that class. Just be able to say hello to me. And then she got into one music class, a theory class that I took, and she took it. And I got an A, and she struggled like crazy through it. So that's kind of how our relationship began. But later on, it came out that she was really planning all of that, trying to get us together in any way she possibly could. And she got me to sing with her at her brother's wedding. And that, you know, it just started to get us together more. And later on, we fell in love and got married. That's how it all started. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize she was conniving through all of that. We were just together on a night, and I took her to it's an Arctic Circle now on 9th South and in State Street. I'm trying to think of the name of it then. It was just a hamburger joint. And I proposed to her in the car in the hamburger joint. Really exciting, isn't it? So I didn't do anything huge.
In June 1963, Grandpa and Grandma Pike got married in the Salt Lake Temple.
She was a neat girl. She really was. I was really lucky to get a girl like her. She was very, very sweet, very devoted, fun singer, fun to be with. A little crazy. And that helps.
Yeah, but she didn't like spiders.
No, she didn't like spiders. That's right. She was a person without guile. I could have trouble with her at times, maybe, or we would disagree. But you never questioned the motives. Her motives were always good. And she was a guileless, sweet person that way, and everything she did for good reasons, and she was a good friend to everybody. Everybody loved Ellen Jean.
Grandpa and Grandma moved into a house in Bountiful, Davis County in 1964, and lived there until 1969, pretty much the entire span of Beatlemania. A lot of people in Bountiful blamed Yoko. In 1965, they welcomed Uncle John. He was followed by Rick, Steve, Dave, Liz, and Emily. The Schnauzers were part of their family too. Duffy, Fonzie, and Spunky. The family did a lot of usual family things like sports, church events, and weekly Sunday dinners with extended family. The years were marked with annual trips to Bear Lake in late August and trips to Capistrano in California. Of course, they made a lot of music. Most of those years were spent on Brookburn Road and East Mill Creek.
I started out working in the Lockhart with the Lockhart Company. It was a financial company, in what was known as an industrial loan company back in those days. And I spent 23 years there, and then it was owned by the Zions Bank family. It was owned by Zions Bank, by the people who had the stock in that company, and they sold it finally because there were some advantages to having it as far as helping to raise funds for their lending purposes, and so they sold it. So I went to work for Intermountain Healthcare, and I worked for them for about 12 years till I retired. So I had those two main careers, so to speak.
His career was cut short due to a few mistakes that he made. It was a hard time for him and his family. This rough time in his life has taught me that even the best people make mistakes. We don't have to let hard things that we go through define who we are.
I think maybe if I'd have done anything else, I'd like to have been a music teacher of some sort, directing choirs and working with music.
A professor?
Yeah, but I never did pursue that. I didn't have the courage to do that. Didn't seem to know that I would be good at it. Didn't have anybody telling me I would either. So.
Due to some tough financial circumstances, in the late 80s, Grandpa and Grandma had to move. Luckily, they were able to buy Great-Grandma Pike's house, which kept them in the East Mill Creek area and close to family, friends, and schools. Grandma took on a teaching job at Canyon Rim Elementary School. She had graduated in the early 60s with a teaching degree from the University of Utah. After his time with IHC, Grandpa started a self-employment phase where he tuned pianos and taught voice lessons. In fall of 2001, Grandma Pike got sick and was diagnosed with a form of leukemia. The doctors, nurses, and caregivers at the LDS hospital helped her stay with Grandpa and the family for almost 3 years. Most of that time, she was active and vibrant. She died on the 12th of August in 2004. She was only 63. I was not quite 14 months old at the time, so I don't have any memories of her. But I do feel like she left a big hole, and I see how the family misses her. I also think if we were to make a film like this more focused on her, it would be really funny. Grandpa kept doing what he'd been doing, tuning pianos, teaching voice, and singing at funerals, well into his late 70s. It's just a few years ago that Grandpa finally retired. He turned 80 in 2017, and we had an open house birthday party for him at the church. Hundreds of his friends and neighbors stopped by to wish him well. That same year, he sold his house to Uncle Ken and Aunt Emily, his youngest daughter. They are now the third generation of Pikes to own the house. Part of the deal included him continuing to live there.
What is one thing you want people to most want people to remember about you?
Oh, I hope maybe just my good friend and a kind friend. Maybe that's the best. I hope that I've made some memories for some people of good music too, maybe. But something like that.
God on high, hear my prayer. In my need, you have always been there. He is young. let him rest, heaven blessed. Bring him home, bring him home, bring him home. He's like the sun I might have known if God had granted me a son. The summers die one by one, how soon they fly on and on, and I am old and will be gone. Bring him peace, bring him joy. He is young, he is only a boy. You can take, you can give, let him be, let him live. If I die,